Next, on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Last night, RNC, good representation of athletes or those connected to athletics. We mentioned and played some clips from Burgess Owens, friend of the show, a little bit earlier. He was excellent. Also, Jack Brewer, who's had some profile recently as well, former Viking. Jack Brewer talking about the way that the media portrays Donald Trump. Jack Brewer, African-American gentleman, it's important to note.
I'm Jack Brewer, a former three-time NFL team captain, college professor, coach, husband, son, and father. I'm also a lifelong Democrat, but I support Donald Trump. Let me be clear. I didn't come here for the popularity or the praise, the likes or the retweets. I'm here as a servant to God, a servant to the people of our nation, and a servant to our president. I grew up in Grapevine, Texas, a town that my great-grandfather was the first black man to settle as a sharecropper in 1896. My early high school experience included fighting with skinheads and being a witness in an attempted murder trial after my friend shot a skinhead in self-defense. I remember my dad's bravery when he personally stood up against a KKK rally in my town. In my house, my father taught me to back down from no one. I know what racism looks like. I've seen it firsthand. In America, it has no resemblance to President Trump. And I'm fed up with the way he's portrayed in the media, who refuse to acknowledge what he's actually done for the black community.
And Brewer also, to his credit, really to his credit, because there's Republicans who won't do this, much less, as he said, a lifelong Democrat at the RNC, disabusing people of the Charlottesville lie, as we have here, playing the president's words. You don't have to believe, standard issue white people like me. Jack Brewer.
Are you going to allow the media to lie to you by falsely claiming that he said there were very fine white supremacists in Charlottesville? He didn't say that. It's a lie. And ignore the so-called Black Lives Matter organization that openly, on their website, calls for the destruction of the nuclear family. My fellow Americans, our families need each other. We need black fathers in the homes with their wives and children. The future of our communities depend on it.
Why is relitigating the Charlottesville reaction from Trump important? Because Joe Biden said that was the moment he decided to run for president. He knew he had to run for president. That's the rationale for the Biden presidential candidacy, according to Joe Biden himself.
And we all know that's a bunch of bunk.
Well, so the basis of his candidacy is a lie, and he's at least consistent there because the lying continues. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Rich Lowry. He's the editor of National Review, nationalreview.com, Fox News contributor, author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. And Rich, I don't know about you, but I wish conventions were, and maybe the Republican convention, this can be a watershed moment. Herschel Walker, Jack Brewer, Burgess Owens, and also business owners, regular people, three-dimensional human beings actually living lives as opposed to people in political office are so much more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really been true this week. In general, I haven't liked quote unquote ordinary people at conventions because they're usually filler, and I like to see what the office holders are going to say with their traditional convention rhetoric. But I think the ordinary people have been really effective. I think they've been poignant. I think they've been pungent. I think they've really landed some blows against Joe Biden, especially the Green New Deal. I think they've been used in a canny political manner. The other night, you had a lobsterman from Maine. Well, why Maine? Well, there's a congressional district that might matter a lot.
Yeah, right.
In Maine,
and a Senate race.
And a logger from Minnesota last night.
Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a couple people from Wisconsin. And we're going to have one of our folks kind of look this up. But I think there have been more African-American speakers, featured speakers, than at the Democratic convention, and maybe I wonder if at any convention ever. And some of those voices have really been stirring. I don't think they're going to move the needle, with African American voters per se. But the play here is to soften the president's image, rebut some of the unfair criticisms, like that Charlottesville one that Biden makes all the time, and then maybe you persuade some Republican suburbanites who've been alienated. And if the convention does nothing else but that's progress.
These aren't actors. I mean, these African Americans, they are true Trump fans and Republicans. And in 2016, he got 8% of the African American vote. Don't you think that any of this will raise the bar on that, maybe to get into double digits with African American support?
If that happened, that'd be a pretty big deal. I kind of doubt it, but the area where there's room to grow, and again, I don't want to exaggerate how much, it's at the margins, is among African American middle class, working class men. I think this is also true with Latino working class, middle class men who don't like the idea of people running down our country, who are deeply patriotic, who work with their hands, who work really hard, who are proud of what they achieved and love this country. And they're out there. And there's a natural appeal to Trump and his message for those kind of voters. So it could tick up some among African American men, but we're talking real small margins. And to make a bigger difference with African Americans will take, it's not going to be this president. It's going to take more time and more work, but there is potential there.
Okay. Are you surprised by the lethargy in terms of the response time on violence in America's cities, including now in Kenosha, from Biden and Democrats generally? I mean, it's one thing. We don't have to pay attention to it in Portland and Seattle, Chicago, because those are deep blue states. We've got those locked up. Minnesota, maybe you could even make the case, although that seems pretty tight. But Wisconsin, that's a problem. And still, it took 3 days just about for Joe Biden to first denounce the police again and then say, oh, also needless violence is not helpful. They clearly don't think that having to they clearly don't think they have to address what's happening in America's big cities. It's and now smaller cities. It's sort of surprising to me.
It's shocking. I mean, they had one of the biggest platforms they're going to have last week in this campaign, outside of the debates, which are a little different. Convention, you just purely control what you're going to say. And they didn't even make have a to be sure line about rioting. Op-ed writers, we always, the to be sure line that we kind of add in to cover ourselves. To be sure, Trump might act unusually, but, he's been great on the Middle East or whatever it is. They couldn't even say, to be sure, rioting is wrong, but we really care about social justice and there's systematic racism in our country and we're going to fix it. They couldn't even bring themselves to do that. And it's clearly they're afraid of doing anything to dampen African-American turnout in the fall, because that was one of the undoings of Hillary Clinton. Plus, these are their allies, and they're just really reluctant to criticize them. And it's one of the most glaring and blatant hypocrisies in American life at the moment. If there were one right-wing, center-right rally that had just one incident of looting, one incident of arson, one incident of a shopkeeper defending his livelihood getting knocked unconscious, the cause, whatever that cause was that those protesters were advancing, would be discredited forever, right? And instead, this is just taken for granted that this happens and it's okay. It's really shameful.
It's amazing too, because it seems like all you had to do was essentially recite the line that Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron did, which is we care about justice and remedying injustice, whether it's injustice in the case of Breonna Taylor in Louisville or it's injustice in the case of the murder of St. Louis police officer David Dorn. I mean, that's a controversial statement.
Yeah. And this is the other thing Democrats just cannot admit. This unrest and the anti-police action has led to increased crime, not just riots, but ongoing increased crime in the cities. So you have young black men, mostly, being gunned down at greater rates because of what's happened. So that materially harms black lives. and they can't admit that, and they won't say that or address that either. So this is a huge opening for Republicans. You've seen some of it at the conventions and and I hope there'll be more of it going forward.
And clearly, it's not going away. James Carafano from the Heritage Foundation, writing over at Fox News, talking about why he doesn't think it's going to go away, and I agree with him. One of the things he says is, we're facing a capable enemy. The street militias have shifted targets and tactics to sustain pressure on communities and local officials. They've become consistently more belligerent. They've developed aggressive legal tactics, allowing them to bail out rioters, even those charged with assaulting police. Almost as quickly as they're arrested, they've developed sophisticated social networking and media strategies that allow them to distribute how-to riot guides as well as spread disinformation and propaganda. They have financial and logistical support. They have no interest in stopping. They're not being publicly chastened by the Democrat socialists, and so they won't stop. It seems to me this has the possibility of supplanting or at least making sort of co-equal COVID-19 and law and order in terms of what informs people's votes on November 3rd.
You know, it's funny you say that, because if you would have told me that even like a week ago, I'd say you're crazy. You know, COVID is a much more important issue, much more top of mind for people. But then I saw this Pew Research poll about a week ago that asked what people care about. Economy is the top issue, you know, as it has been almost in every election, and that's good news for Trump because he has a slight advantage still on the economy. But COVID was 4, and law and order was 5. So this is a big issue, and you're also right. I was talking to a photojournalist who has a network of other photojournalists who's not a right winger and has been covering these rallies a lot, and a lot of them, not all of them, the looting. It's instigated by Antifa types who have these methods that they spread, you know, in networks across the country. And you got one guy with a crowbar, dressed in black from head to toe, who kind of sneaks in, you know, smashes a window of a CVS or whatever it is. And then there's a spotter that you can always see who's watching, you know, for the cops or for anyone who might try to stop this guy. And this guy just skulks off after breaking the window, and then the riot's on. Wow. You know, the looting's on once the window's broken. So some of this is just, you know, BLM protesters just out of control, which I think is what we've seen in Wisconsin the last couple of nights. But some of it is anarchists, you know, deliberately stoking it.
So if the Democrats didn't have the COVID issue, you know, to attack Trump with, what else would they have? What else? I mean, everything is, that whole week long was about COVID and how he mishandled COVID, and more lives would be saved if he acted sooner. And I don't know how he could have acted sooner. I thought he did the best job he could have done.
Yeah, I think that the problem on COVID, well, there are a couple problems. One is just what he said, and he just, at the beginning, he just should have taken it seriously. Should have more seriously in his rhetoric. Should have said, this could be really bad. Let's prepare for the worst. That's the typical play of a politician. Like when a hurricane comes, you don't say, oh, it might blow a little, but then it's just going to be gone. You're going to say, this could be really bad. Let's prepare. And that's what he should have done. And there were some stumbles in the initial response with regard to testing, but they've done an enormous amount. And, you know, Pence talked about it some last night. I really wish they would have had one of these admirals. There are 2 who are in charge of the PPE effort and the supply chain effort with regard to testing, who've done, if you just listen to them the 20 minutes, you'll be stunned. They'll tell you so much you don't know. They'll give great specifics about the scale of this effort, why it hasn't been totally federalized, why the whole thing has been geared towards supporting private industry and supporting the states. And I just wish they had one of those guys with a whiteboard, a chalkboard, and just let him go for 15 minutes. Because I think that this is something that really needs to be rebutted in detail, and it hasn't been yet.
Yeah, you're right, in detail and repetitively. And so I thought the first night of the convention, that 45 seconds of Democrat governors Newsom, Cuomo, and Murphy, what they were saying about the federal response at the height of the outbreak in their respective states versus what they're saying today, was really effective. I mean, it really undermined about 75% of last week's DNC in terms of the on the merits of it, on the substance of it, lauding the federal response. Thank you so much. It's been incredible. The Army Corps of Engineers, the Javits Center, the ships, the PPE, the ventilators. Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, at the White House, praising President Trump. And now, of course, he's an incompetent boob who didn't take it seriously. It's just juxtaposing those two things.
Yeah, but don't do it just in a 45-second video that might be missed. Say, here's someone giving a COVID speech. In the media, you say, we're not addressing COVID. Democrats, you made this – here's a COVID speech.
Yeah,
so it gets a lot of attention, and it's systematic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, bringing Gerard or somebody forward to go into painstaking detail, right? I mean, give you the kind of briefing he would give the president on the topic would be I agree with you. I think that would be great as well. The president speaks tonight. Obviously, he's going to address race relations. I assume he will address COVID in some material way. What's the overall framing you think best positions Trump for re-election in terms of, it's going to be 20 or 25 minutes, but it's got to all come down to sort of a single question that you want to be thinking about when you go to vote. What does Trump want us to be thinking about?
Can you trust Joe Biden? And making the case, as Penn said last night, that Biden is the Trojan horse for the left and their agenda is dangerous and wrong for America. And so there's been a lot of effort at this convention to kind of soften up Trump's image, and maybe that's necessary. But I think it's really the policy case. If he gets over the top, it's not going to be because most people concluded, okay, he's a really nice guy.
Right.
He's a necessary guy to stop this, stop the left. So I hope, his tone is in keeping with kind of the tone of the convention, which has been a little softer sell of Donald Trump. So I hope he's relatively optimistic and uplifting, but I hope he really is excoriating about the Democratic agenda and gives us more detail about what his agenda is going to be. Because, again, if he gets over the top and he's got a lot of work to do, some ground to make up in this election, it's going to be on substance, and it's going to be on the different visions.
He is Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review, Fox News contributor, and the author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks. And we want to remind everyone that AM 560 has full coverage of the 2020 RNC tonight. Reverend Franklin Graham, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, and, of course, President Trump. You can listen live on your radio at 560theanswer.com.